There are Russian tanks a few metro stops away. Why are you still standing there? I mean, it's entertaining again for us, but think about it. This guy, I don't know if it's just like they were so convinced of their own rather naive opinion about, first of all, Russia, Putin, and their own risk that, and the risk that Kiev will be attacked and their own personal safety, that they just don't want to deal with reality. Maybe they're a little bit traumatized and in shock here.
Tsar Experience.
Salute and greetings from beautiful Bucharest. I got the Arc de Triomphe just behind me. And I guess you probably, if you've never been to Bucharest, you probably don't know there's also an Arc de Triomphe here, not just in Paris. So many people have written to me and asked me for my opinion on what went down at the beginning of Russia's new invasion of Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, with Johnny FD and Ben from Bold and Bankrupt, two pretty big YouTubers. Ben is probably one of the biggest YouTubers in Eastern Europe, making that his main focus, and what looked like a sequel to Dumb and Dumber when they were walking down Khreshchatyk, the main thoroughfare through Kiev at the beginning of a war, seemingly oblivious to the risk of what was going on. So I'm going to deal with that in this video. I'm going to limit it to what went on basically on day 2 of the invasion. There's a lot obviously that goes on in general. Since then, it's day 20 of Russia's war on Ukraine, new war in Ukraine. So let's get into it. I'm going to take a few clips from both Johnny FD's channel and one that Ben from Bombang put on his Instagram, and just comment on the scene. Now, as a background, I don't know Johnny FD, I never met him. I did do a video about when he appeared on RT, which is Russia Today, which is now actually banned on YouTube. But he did an interview, a rather unfortunate interview, where he could have been perceived as promoting Russian propaganda a couple of weeks before they invaded Ukraine again. And Ben from Bomb Bankrupt, I have met in person. I even filmed with him a couple of times. And we even talked on Messenger on day 1 of the invasion. And it's funny because I didn't ask him if he was with Johnny FD, because if I had known, I would have told him, what are you doing with Johnny FD if there's a war, if there's a Russian invasion and Kiev could be attacked at any minute, the center, when that's the last guy that you want to be standing beside, probably as you know, the worst foreigner to stand beside in all of Kiev. Now I know that Johnny FD since the start of war has done a mea culpa video, and he has suddenly gone from plausibly Moscow's man in Ukraine by appearing on RT and just in his videos in the months before the war, repeating many of Russian propaganda's talking points. Now he's gone, he's flipped, and he's now Mr. Slava Ukraini. Not sure if it's heartfelt, genuine, or the fact that Russia may have destroyed one of his investment properties in Kharkiv, judging by the bombing that's taken place since the beginning of the war. But anyways, he has done that mea culpa, so take it at face value if you want to. Anyways, let's get into the video and see exactly what they were doing on day 2 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in Kiev, the capital.
You know, war, right? He has a helmet. We are the only 2 crazy guys.
Exactly, the only 2 crazy guys. Now, crazy, stupid, dumb, hard to tell. Why are they walking down Khreshchatyk? The information at the time is that Russians already had tanks in part of Kiev, and they're walking down the main thoroughfare to the center, and there's no one else around. That should tell you something, Johnny. It's probably not a good idea to be there.
There's a couple Ukrainian guys walking around, but most of them look, you know, either most people are military or journalists. Like literally, it's just us here.
Yeah, and let's be clear, military targets, obviously, if the Russians are going to attack someone on the street. Second of all, journalists, it seems that also targets. If you look at what happened to the Sky News team, they basically got shot up, and not just their car, also they were hit. They were wearing bulletproof vests. Johnny's standing there without a bulletproof vest, no helmet, and he's walking down the main thoroughfare in Kiev, and he's the only civilian. Man, let's go on. I mean, some people that write maybe slightly meanly below my videos when they're asking me to comment that he was going for the Darwin Award, if you understand what I mean.
There was bombings this morning around 4 or 5 in the morning. There's been air raid sirens kind of all morning. One of my neighbors wrote me saying he heard some kind of gunfire, machine gun fire near us.
So he's been hearing that there's gunfire and shelling. Why are you still there? The first thing to point out here is they did not have an evacuation plan, it looks like. They were so convinced, and he says this a little bit later on. I'm going to play a clip where he's been saying there's only 5% chance that they invade Kiev. So he hasn't made a plan to evacuate, it looks like. They're sitting there in a war zone when they had months and months to prepare, and they have no plan. I was in Chernovtsi, crossing the border already, when these two plonkers are walking down Reshadik and having a clue what they're doing in a place that's dangerous. Why was I in Chernovtsi? Because I knew it was one of the last places that Russia would attack at the beginning of the war. It's 40 kilometers from the Romanian border. And most people who are fleeing were not going to go to the Romanian border. So I thought that's probably the best place to get out. And I was pre-positioned a week before. Now I understand, just before I play more of Johnny, that as a YouTuber doing sensible things, especially if you're an entertainment YouTuber, it's not going to be as entertaining, is it? I mean, that's why I'm reacting to this crazy video. So for Johnny, I can actually see a little bit of taking the risk and getting the reward, like it's going to build up his channel, get him a lot of views. So yeah, I can kind of see that might have been worth taking for him. But he should have had an evacuation plan. Ben from Bald and Bankrupt, I can't believe he didn't have more sense. He doesn't need the extra views if it's the risk getting killed. But apparently, even though he's been warned about the shooting and everything, he hasn't taken any action. So far, this is day 2 of the morning of Russia's invaded Ukraine, and he's still walking down the main street. And he's the only person there who's a civilian.
The question is, why didn't I leave?
Why, Johnny?
It's because I knew it was going to be insane to get out. One friend, Alex, good friend, Ukrainian guy, he walked 10 kilometers and then hitchhiked out. Because there was so much traffic, it would have taken longer to sit there. I mean, I saw some live streams yesterday where buses and cars were just stuck for hours.
Yeah, clearly, if you try to leave when everyone else leaves, it's going to be hell, right? Because there's a war and people are scared, rightly so. Well, we've seen what happened since then, right? I mean, even on that first morning, there was obviously a lot of explosions, a lot of attacks, but they've, if you look at the neighboring city, the second city of Ukraine, rather, Kharkiv, where Johnny has an investment property and it's probably been damaged, if not destroyed, by Russian shelling. Yeah, they're going to fire indiscriminately. And everybody who didn't plan, which is most of the Ukrainian population, all had to try and flee a lot. Well, the people who had the most sense, at least at that point, to get out. So it's going to be hard. That's why you needed a plan beforehand, that if this worst case scenario happened, you were going to get out without too much problem. And I understand the risk reward again about staying in Kiev and filming for him, but you got to have a plan in place. You can't be like, I don't want to leave because there's a lot of people on the road. Let's wait and walk down Reshadik when I've been on RT Russia Today only a couple of weeks before reciting Russian propaganda. Maybe I made a video about that, reacting to it, but he was led by the interviewer and whatnot. But he's been repeating a lot of Russia Today's talking points for months, and now he's walking down the main street where there could be saboteurs by Russians disguised as civilians or disguised Ukrainian troops who could shoot him just because they see that, he's maybe a foreigner or maybe American, or maybe the Ukrainians would shoot him thinking that he's out doing another propaganda video, or he could get caught in just like be collateral damage to them if they just strike, the nice building behind him in Kiev. And they did that in Kharkiv, and they did it in a lot of other cities. They haven't done it, it's day 20 in Kiev so far, it seems, in that area. And then he had reports of tanks in parts of the city. Why are you still there? That's just my question. Anyways, let's go on and see this freak show a bit more.
I see that in Russia, in St. Petersburg and Moscow, throughout Russia, there's a lot of anti-war protests. Most Russian people don't hate Ukrainians. They don't want a war with Ukraine. It's the Russian government that wants it. It's Putin who wants it.
I mean, that's partly true that Putin wants the war. Obviously, he was the one who made the decision. But thinking that most Russians don't want the war, well, best estimates are that 70% of the Russian population support it. So again, his analysis, not really based on anything like fact. It's kind of like what he wishes was happening. And there he's standing in the historical center of Kiev. I guess it looks like he's presuming, well, they're not going to target that, are they? They blew up the historical center of Kharkiv. And not because it's a military target, they blew it up. They blew up the bars that I used to bring my clients to, the restaurants they used to eat in, the nice historic buildings that line Sumska Street. They blew them up. And he's naively walking down the street with these similar buildings in the capital. Man, crazy, crazy. I mean, it's definitely entertaining.
Yes, I know Western media was right this time, but it doesn't mean they're always right. Like, they could have been hyping up the war like they do so many other times. I mean, we forget that, was it Iran or Iraq? I can't remember now. Like, for both countries, actually, American media and government hyped it up, saying 100% they have nuclear weapons.
All right, so then he goes into why he was of the opinion, persuasion that it was all Western propaganda, that, you know, they're hyping up there wouldn't be a war. Now, definitely with Iraq, US intelligence, they were hyping up a war, but that's because they were the ones going to invade. They were hyping up the WMD, right? That was their casus belli, ostensibly, for going in, which wasn't true, but yeah, that's ancient history. It's like 20 years ago. In this situation, they're pointing out that Russia's amassing this force with the possibility to invade Ukraine. And Joe Biden said that they were planning to sack Kiev. Now, Joe Biden is not exactly the guy who still has a lot of confidence in many people, whether you're American or you're a foreigner. But that language should get alarm bells ringing. Well, I have to consider the possibility that he's telling the truth and that being in Kiev is going to be, you know, definitely not a good idea to be just hanging around without a plan in. When President Putin made his declaration of war speech, because that's what it was, 2 days before the invasion, and he said it very plainly, I made a reaction video to that, I'll link it up above and down below. He said that Ukraine has no right to exist independently of Russia, that its borders are illegitimate, that's run by these Nazis, that they're basically more or less traitors, to paraphrase them, for not wanting to be with Russia, right? So even if you didn't believe the Western media, US intelligence, and open source intelligence, because you go check for yourself that all these troops were there and they're actually going to invade, the fact that President Putin of Russia made this rambling, I don't know, was an hour-long speech effectively declaring war on Ukraine, should have let you know, well, maybe I don't believe the Western media, but this guy is telling me, he's giving me all the reason to believe they're about to invade, right? Man. Unbelievable.
So, let me show you guys around. Bald has rolled up in the middle of the battlefield, actually, guys. He's there talking to some war journalists now, getting some intel.
Oh, that's smart. Let's go talk to some war journalists who are wearing body armor and helmets because they don't want to get killed if they get shot at. Well, I'm just going to wander up to them. Yeah. I mean, they're so oblivious to the risks. I mean, Darwinian award. Thankfully, they got out okay, right? I don't wish that anything bad had happened to them.
So far, and hopefully this stays this way, is Russia's not targeting civilians. They're targeting military infrastructure.
So again, he just buys into the Russian narrative that they're only targeting military infrastructure. Definitely, that didn't turn out to be the case at all. Now, they were targeting less civilian infrastructure at the beginning of the war. That's clear. But again, I mean, why are you standing on Reshadik all the time? Man, you need to be in a bomb shelter. You need to be getting out of there.
Rumor has it that there are tanks, Russian tanks, in Obolon, which is a district a few metro stops away. Really not very far.
There are Russian tanks a few metro stops away. Why are you still standing there? I mean, it's entertaining again for us, but think about it. This guy, I don't know if it's just like they were so convinced of their own rather naive opinion about, first of all, Russia, Putin, and their own risk that Kyiv will be attacked and their own personal safety, that they just don't want to deal with reality. Maybe they're a little bit traumatized and in shock here, Arjani, because he knows that there are tanks. Obolon is not that far away from the center. As he says, there's a couple of metro stops. Now, if it weren't for the effectiveness of Ukrainian military and the bravery and fighting spirit of the Ukrainian military, there probably would have been Russian troops or strikes exactly where he was standing. But the Russian plan doesn't seem to have worked. I mean, they seem pretty clear that they were aiming for a quick victory and to take Kiev, take the center of gravity of the country, and that didn't work out. But there was fighting in Obolon, and it's not very far away from the center. But I know, it's just like, I guess he hasn't computed the information and, you know, the change in circumstances and the threat level fully, because he's walking down Reshetik and he's not talking about how he's leaving yet. He's there talking about, you know, what's going on and reporting from the ground. Madness.
So hopefully it doesn't come here. But, I mean, the tension is thick.
The tension is thick. He looks extremely nervous. He's actually developed a bit of a tick. He keeps does this all the way through the video. I'll put the link down below to the video if you want to watch the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, he's scared, which I understand. He should be, but he still is. Anyways, let's go on. It's just like incredible.
I really hope that Ukraine survives this without too much collateral damage, both to, you know, the people, the civilians, but also to, you know, infrastructure, to buildings, to people's lives.
Again, this.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I know some people think I was delusional for staying, but
Yeah.
the calculations were correct.
His calculations were correct. Like, basically, if you think, all right, put it this way, if you think there's going to be a nuclear strike on a city that you're standing in, you think, yeah, the chances are 5%. That is catastrophic damage. That means you're definitely dead, right? I mean, I guess 99.9% likely if you're fucking going to hang out in the city. So even if there's a 5% chance, the price or the consequence is so severe that even a 5% chance, you should be making sure that you get the hell out of there. Because if you do it 20 times, you're going to die, right? That's pretty high for anything. So, yeah, and it wasn't 5%. I mean, I thought before the war it was, of a military intervention at all, I thought over 50%. And then I saw the declaration of war speech. So I was like, I really hope there's a way out of this, and that he doesn't do it. But it looks almost certain. It looks like 90% likely now. And I was already in position. I'd actually moved a week before when I was still thinking it was a little bit over 50% likely. And if they were going to attack Ukraine and launch an invasion, I didn't see the point in just taking a land bridge or taking a little bit of Donbass. I mean, to do all that and only take that small amount when you've already kind of crossed the Rubicon. If you have a revanchist autocrat in power who may be fearing the end of his days and not leaving the legacy he wants to, because in that declaration of war speech he was talking about, you know, history and, you know, obviously he'd been reading up on these great leaders and where they had gone in the Russian Empire. So yeah, first up Ukraine, and definitely taking Kiev. To think otherwise is extremely naive. So I would have said, you know, the day before that he's looking at of action attack on Kiev, somewhere in the range of 75%. So he still thinks it's 5%. And even if it were only 5%, you shouldn't be standing there.
There was a 5% chance that Russia and Putin would actually invade and bomb Kiev, the capital, because it was an insane move.
Yeah, clearly it's an insane move. It's basically stupid. And that's been, shown on day 20 that this war is a terrible idea for Russia. And I think also for Putin. And never mind for the Ukrainians and the Russian soldiers and the Ukrainian soldiers who died. Yeah, it's just fucking mad. It was a mad gamble, basically.
Fuck, you hear it. But it's far enough away where I'm not too worried at this moment.
So now you hear shelling, but it's far enough away.
There are still some people walking around. I don't know where people are going, why they're here.
Johnny, why are you there? That's what I'm asking myself at this stage. Yeah, and you should be asking yourself as well. Man, this is insane.
So I have two choices. I can either try to leave. Oh shit, someone just jumped. That door just opened. It scared the crap out of me, but...
Man, poor guy. I feel bad for him. I mean, now he's jumpy and startling. He's startled by just about anything, a door opening. And he's kind of still hoping that Russia doesn't do the things that, first of all, they've already started doing. And second of all, history has shown us, or the events have shown us that it got a hell of a lot worse. And yeah, it's just as well that they didn't manage to make so much progress in Kiev that day because, yeah, getting out of there would have been a lot more complicated. Anyways, that's enough of Johnny. Let me just show you Ben from Bold and Banquet because he's there on the square with Johnny. Again, why would you walk down the street with Johnny FD on day 2 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? He's a guy who's been an RT, has proven himself to not have a proper risk assessment or a plan what to do in this situation. And he's a big target. And in general, walking down there is a target, but definitely with Johnny FD, you're an even bigger target, in my opinion. So let's see what Ben was saying on Instagram, but someone recorded it and put it on, so I actually was able to get recording.
I don't know. I've got nothing else to say. I've got no opinions on this. I'm not a geopolitical expert. Everything I've predicted so far has been wrong. I never thought there'd be an invasion. I was like, nah, Putin's not that insane. That's not going to happen. But yeah, I know nothing.
Well, at least Ben makes a mea culpa there and says he doesn't know anything about geopolitics and he predicted everything wrong.
Everything is quiet and peaceful. If something happens later and I hear it or I see it, of course, I'll do an update and I'll show you guys. I've got nothing else to say.
All right, so he says, like, if anything happens later, he's going to be there to record it for as long as he's not affecting the military operation. Let's see what they were doing just a couple hours later on the second day of the invasion.
A few moments later.
Well, it's the 25th of February, about 3:30 in the afternoon, and apparently the Russian tanks are going to enter the centre at any moment. Myself and Johnny are going to head down to the railway station and try and get ourselves out of the city somewhere safer.
Well, by 3:30, they're making a beeline for the train station because they believe the Russian tanks are about to enter the city. So I guess he made a calculated risk assessment that staying around to film for you the Russian capture of the center or the fighting in the center of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, was not worth getting possibly killed for, which I agree with. They look pretty scared, both of them. Understandable, because they're fleeing a war zone and they actually think that the Russians might actually invade where they are standing extremely quickly. But again, why did they put themselves in that position? And it's kind of interesting that only a couple hours earlier their assessment was not to evacuate but to hang around and film it. And then suddenly, in between, they realized, no, staying here to film this might be the last thing that we ever publish. And part of my calculation about leaving as well was, first of all, getting a jail out of the country, and second, for myself about whether I would go back in or not. I expected the internet to be taken out, and on day 20 I was wrong. Internet still works in most of Ukraine, maybe not in your phone if you're in an newly occupied part, like in Kherson apparently, but in most of the country it still seems to work, so actually could have published from it. Anyways, later on they get on a train and they head towards the border, and that's a completely different series of events. And I know a lot of people have written underneath in comments that they didn't give the best representation of themselves. It is a war and they're trying to flee, but one of the things that you would have encountered in that situation we're leaving is the fact that in Eastern Europe, for sure, unlike in the West, women and children, chivalry, they get priority in this kind of situation. It's a bit like the Titanic. Women and children first, men to stay on board and go down with the ship kind of attitude. And that probably impacted on the perception that people have of them when they were leaving. That's a completely different story. You can watch their video. I'll link everything down below and enjoy that, at least from the entertainment point of view. So that's my reaction. So many people wrote to me and asked me, and you've also sent me a lot of other material to react to that's been happening in Ukraine or to do with Ukraine in terms of analysis mainly, especially the idiots, useful idiots, Russian shills. Gonzalo Lira owned up to that, basically. That's actually interesting. I mean, I said on day 2 of the invasion that Johnny UFD was probably the last person you wanted to be standing beside, walking down for Shattuck. Probably Gonzalo Lira became that person as soon as Johnny FD made his exit from Kiev, and there are other people I'm sure that you don't want to be standing beside in this war, because they're probably going to attract the wrong kind of attention. Anyway, it's good that the two guys got out. Reckless behavior, in my opinion. They should have had a plan. I guess, it's very easy, and I'm also guilty of this. It's like, if you attach yourself and your ego to a position, and you're emotionally involved in it, like you've said it on camera or on your social media constantly for months, and then it turns out you get evidence in front of you that makes it clear I was completely wrong. It'd be very hard to disconnect from that and just say, okay, Putin made this crazy speech where it's the declaration of war, so we need to decide how we're getting out of Kiev. So that's my reaction. Let me know what you think down below, and keep your suggestions coming for what you would like me to react to and give my 2 cents on. But anyways, that's Johnny FD and Mr. Bold and their debacle on day 2 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And thanks to all the members of the Ukrainian military that stopped the Russian advance, and maybe I should also thank the Russian incompetence, it seems a little bit, in terms of their military, that they didn't get that far yet, and definitely not in day 2, and the two guys got out in the end. Okay, see you in the next video. Osaro Buna, do pobачення, до свидания from Bucharest in Romania.
SAR Experience.